sonic bomb? Are you kidding me?
So this is it, the last time I'll be taking a look at Marvel's Avengers. I'm sure you'll be happy to know, but the beta is now available again for the final time before release on consoles and PC, and here I take a final look at the PC version covering both the AMD and the Nvidia cards, the most popular and good representation of the market in the RTX2070, which is very much a mid to high end card, and then the equivalent in AMD in the 5600XT. So how do these cards perform? How does the PC perform overall? And what does it really tell us more about the state of this beta and where it actually is? Well, obviously the first thing is it's definitely a beta, so we knew that before. I've already covered that in all the console versions. So the main issues and points that are touched on in that version: loading, streaming, all the impact that comes from decoding data, using the CPU, streaming data in from the hard drives, all of that is still ever present here and happens all the time, but it's not predominantly limited by that. So all that is still present, and we get judders and stutters consistently throughout the title. I'll cover the performance at the end of the video, but let's go to the visual quality. The first thing is the settings don't fully work. So in the main boot up, when you get the same option here for the foundation engine you do in Rise of the Tomb Raider, Shadow of the Tomb Raider, you can set the graphical settings. Textures can only be set to high, but in the game you can go to ultra, but they don't work. Some other settings can't be changed either, and some of those affect the impact and the quality of the game. So I'm not going to dive too deeply into what the PC offers over and above the consoles. Surprisingly, volumetrics look the same, but other features such as HBAO plus shadows, they can all be slightly higher resolution or even a much higher resolution and quality. Now, looking at the console versions to PC, low is lower than consoles, but high is slightly higher than consoles, so it's somewhere in between. Again, this is missing medium on the PC version, so this might be an option that's added later, but right now there's no medium setting, so I would assume that's what the consoles are sitting at.
That's well it should. Got him. Send in containment units.
Dr. Banner, what do I do?
Run.
What?
Like I say, I don't think all of the feature set is present in the engine, and it's certainly not configurable. Now, there are some bigger issues to talk about, and that's the fact that it crashes often in the title, and Nvidia are affected far worse than AMD. It crashed about twice on the AMD card. I lost count how many times it crashed on my RTX 2070. Latest drivers and everything else. Now, I found that it struggles to change settings in game. That really causes it to crash. If you go into the menu setting, you change settings, that can cause the whole game to lock up and crash. That's where it happened most of the time on the Nvidia card. Like I say, a couple of times on the AMD. So there's certainly some stability issues there to work out in terms of tweaking the engine and playing around with your settings to get the best option. Once in the game, streaming loading sections tended to cause the crashes I saw on the Nvidia card, and as you can see from the memory usage, it uses system RAM up to and above 10 gigabytes of my 16 gig, and then fully uses the VRAM of the cards as well. So like I say, there's probably memory leaks, probably all kinds of standard issues you've got here in terms of using the system itself. Cache misses, bad threading, all those kind of standard optimization stages. Now, aside that, the graphical settings, even at 1440p, it's sharper and cleaner than it is at 4K on the Xbox One X. As I say, it's dynamic. It goes down to as low as 3200 by 1800, I believe, in my previous analysis. It may even go lower, and the PS4 Pro has a checkerboard solution at 4K. They're both sharp, clean, but they're not as sharp as the 1440p image here, and that's largely down to the fact that texture filtering can be ramped up to 16 times, and it's around 4, maybe 8, but looks like 4 on the consoles, and that really struggles and muddies some of the texture quality in the game. Now, texture quality can't go to ultra, but the consoles do look to be running slightly lower than high here, or at least they're not using the breadth of the texture quality which you see on the PC version. So again, it all comes down to what I've said before. Resolution is only part of the image quality. Better filtering, better quality of textures, higher resolution sampling, and all those other effects are much better than just ramping up the image to 4K, because a muddy texture at 4K is still a muddy texture. So you can see the differences here when I'm comparing them on screen. And again, that missing omission of the irradiance map, that reflection map that's not present, the Xbox One, should be put back in. It is present here, but even if you turn off SSR and turn off all cube maps, it's still present on PC, so it's not tied to those directly. And as before, this is fully present on the PlayStation version, so I am leaning towards it's most likely a bug, but we'll have to wait and see what it looks like when the final release comes. So playing through the game, and as you can see comparisons here between the consoles and the PC version, I'm using the Xbox One X because it is the highest resolution of the lot natively, but you can see the differences in the image quality comparing that and then obviously the Pro and the PS4. You can see that radiance map on the cars and the guns where that skylight is missing. It looks duller and darker. There is a tessellation option in the menu screen, but it seems to be tied to the actual settings of the LOD rather than the tessellation itself. Now, there is better rounded objects in the premium consoles. Certainly it's missing heavily on the Xbox One, so I'm not sure whether it's a combination of tessellation on certain objects. It's definitely pared back on consoles, but there are rounder objects, but that also might be the LOD. You can see examples of it here. So again, the consoles are somewhere between medium and high on their overall settings. More high for most settings, shadows, like I say, in between, and everything else in the menu is basically on or off. And again, like I say, this is as close as I can get to the settings from this particular beta against the console versions. Subtle differences between the Pro mode and the Xbox One mode in 4K, but it's very minor. Now, I will stress, don't take these as gospel, because like I say, some of the settings don't actually work in the PC, and this is particularly present in the particle effects, which are largely missing in so many places compared to the consoles, that the assumption is they are high because there's nothing to compare them on the PC. They don't work. Now, I can play around with the INI settings, but time is of the essence, and I didn't see the point. So generally, this is where they sit, and this performance gives you a over 30 FPS processor. You can lock it at 30 on both the 2070 and the 5600 XT at 4K with no issues at all, and that basically gives you a fully native 3840 by 2160. Obviously, you'll still get the streaming and asset issues generally. That happens across all versions. Now, you can run dynamic resolution and probably get slightly better performance, but it's not a 60 FPS 4K game on both these cards, and I doubt, based on the performance levels here, that it's anywhere near 60 at 4K at any point, because it doesn't do it at 1080p either. Now, by and large, the AMD card runs better than the Nvidia card. Ever so slightly, we're talking very minor, but there's points where the AMD is better, there's points where the Nvidia is better, but on the average run of play in the whole tested section, the averages come out slightly better in AMD's favour on the 5600 XT. And this is not a surprise, the game is designed around AMD cards after all, but overall the performance levels running at 1080p still dip below 60 FPS, I mean, too often for it to be a locked 60 FPS, even on the best card here at the 5600 XT. So sorry to quell any dreams of 4K 60 no matter the card, including a 2080 Ti, but there is another generation of cards and consoles to come, so we'll touch on the performance in one moment once we touch the final piece, which is the SSR option on the PC version is better. You can turn it on higher, you get stochastic reflections, you get more dynamic objects, and you can see those obvious trailing images where it's actually a raid march into the last frame to keep the speed of the render. So you can see here as these boxes trail past Black Widow, you can see that it's one frame behind and it's trailing the image itself, but overall the quality, the stochastic reflections and the amount of dynamic objects reflected is present on consoles. It's just not as refined or as often, aside cutscenes where they seem to ramp that up, but they do that for depth of field as well.
You sure kept all my best tech in one place.
Those rockets are doing a lot of damage.
Yeah, I know. I built the damn things.
So we move into the most important part, and that is performance. Now, both of these consoles are sporting SSDs, and that does appear to help out the performance levels over the consoles, but by and large, the stuttering and juddering is not removed. It's not as bad, it doesn't peak as high, certainly in the cutscenes when it loads into the next one. You just saw an example of it there. But it does happen often, but that's because the CPUs are much more powerful, there's more threads, there's more speed, there's basically the IPC count is much better, and there's a lot of work there from the CPU when it's decompressing all this data, and you can see this on both of my Zen CPUs. They both hit 100% or at least 98% on the 3600 at certain points on every thread, so they really are threading all their work to smash that data into the hard drive, into the VRAM, from the hard drive, sorry, into VRAM, and then get it into the systems itself. But remember that PCI Express port and that moving from system RAM over to VRAM, there's those 3 points of copy, so there's more overhead on the PC than there is on the consoles, but you've got much more powerful hardware, therefore overall it mitigates it on the base consoles and obviously the premium ones as well. Now, it'll be interesting to see how this game runs on the next generation consoles and obviously the much better PCs to come in terms of the GPUs, but this certainly seems to be using data streaming very heavily, and the PC recommendations even recommend recommend an SSD. So there's that element in there as well, but obviously we'll see what it looks like. They're not going to be maximizing the velocity architecture on the Xbox One, and obviously the entire I/O port construction on the SoC on the PS5. So this won't be a pinnacle of games that use the kind of I/O streaming, but it will be one of our first examples of a multi-platform game, which I think will benefit from them on both consoles, and I'll be very interested to see how that plays out. But in terms of the PC performance, like I say, 1440p, very much at the maximum settings. I think I knocked down the shadows from very high to high here, but other than that, everything else is on maximum that you can get. But like I say, the caveat is this isn't maximum settings in the menu, and certain things may not even be working. The overall performance is a mixture of CPU related, IO related, but generally it's GPU bound most of the time, even here on these both PCs, the 2070 and the 5600XT. The stutters jump into the next refresh 33 milliseconds, and consistently it's just skipping between 40s and 50s FPS as an average overall. Very similar to the console versions, just slightly elevated in terms of performance, but obviously a much higher resolution. But generally it holds somewhere mid 50s, high 50s, dropping into the 30s at points, and then later on in the game, and obviously the online sections, these are much worse, and it can drop below 30 FPS even on both these cards. So do not expect a lot 60, no matter the resolution. 1440p is probably the best because it doesn't appear to be that much worse at 1080p, and like I say, and that's because it's generally bound by a lot of other issues. GPU bound heavily most of the time. You can see the performance levels and the usage of both the cards here when it's hammering them very heavily. This section with the Hulk is the biggest culprit for smashing up those frame rates. You can see it dipping down to 30 FPS at this end section here. And you'll see exactly the same examples on the AMD card, but overall the average is ever so slightly better, and you can see those stats down below in the comments section. I've pinned it at the top. So it's a good looking game, it's a great playing game. The amount of destruction, physics, interaction and enemy AI and the overall presentation of it is very high. It just needs refinement, it needs optimization, and obviously the current pandemic situation of COVID-19 is not really helping everyone develop software when you're not in an office and you can't submit your code quickly and to speak to your peers and all that kind of standard element that development really benefits from when you're at this point of trying to iron out all your bugs. So I'm sure this will have patches way past its launch, nothing new there, but performance on the PC is obviously better generally than it is on the consoles, but you need much more powerful hardware to get there. So I'll be interested to see what it runs like in its final form once it gets released, or probably a couple of months thereafter. It's not for me, it's not my cup of tea at all. It's not a game that I would spend hours and hours playing, but it is fun, it is enjoyable, and I feel like I've played it now enough to know exactly what the game offers and how it plays after 3 videos of Marvel's Avengers. I hope you guys and girls enjoyed this. Please stick around to watch the rest of the AMD 5600XT footage to see your comparisons. You can see those all-important frame rates playing out in real time, and if you want more information on the stats overall, please look in the comment section below. And if you want to know how the console versions run across every single one, go and check out my other 2 videos, which are also in the description below. I hope you guys and girls enjoyed this, and as always, I'm self-funded and completely independent, so any likes, shares, subscriptions and any good stuff that you guys and girls can do is really beneficial and helps me improve my quality and my coverage and reach. But with that, I'm out, but I'll be back very soon, and I'll see you on the next one.
That ship's not ready for flight. Why is it moving?
Someone's initiated the security protocols. The Chimera's autopilot has taken over.
It could fall if we don't take him out.
Hurry up, big guy. It can't take much more punishment. Where's Big Green?
I got eyes on him. Hulk, bringing in the Quinjet for a landing.
Hulk smash! Charge!
Extraordinary! Take it down! Doc, I'll get back to you. The ship can't take much more of this.
I'm trying.
Tarleton! Avengers, do you read? What's happening out there? Avengers, report!
Shepard in my sights!
Shepard?
Avengers, if you can hear me, the convoy is transporting a highly lethal sonic disruptor bomb. Right.
It isn't too late. Strain the Hulk! You saw the truth, Banner. You were the only one. We're fixing the damage the Avengers did. We're waiting all those years ago. There is a chance for all those Inhumans to have a better life. We can still save the Inhumans from your fate. They want the cure.
He's lying. He's not saving anyone.
We shouldn't have to come to this. I can see you fighting him. You don't want to be his thing. But you're weak. Both of you.